Welcome guys to the Grandmaster's Choice. The video today unfortunately starts a little bit late, but nevertheless I hope we can provide interesting content. So let's not waste time and just get started immediately. Today's topic will be Italian game, and I chose this as a topic simply because I thought the Italian game is very popular nowadays. I played it quite often in 2019. This year haven't gotten to play too many games yet, but in 2019 I played quite relatively often, and I want to show some of my games with both colors, with white and black, and let's learn what ideas are there for both colors. So the first game I want to show is my game versus Amin Bassem from World Team Championships, where it was the first round, and it was important match because it was my first time I played for the United States in team competition. So it was e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, c3, knight f6, d3, d6, short castle. In general, there are some lines, of course, with d5. For instance, here it's possible to play as well short castle d5, which lead to simply different type of fight. Personally, I prefer to go for d6, at least in 2019 and earlier as well. I used to employ only d6 quite successfully. So therefore I just play d6, castle a6. And right now there is a choice for white. Basically two main moves, a4 or bishop b3. This is what my opponent played, but a4 is basically main move. But I don't want to dive into theoretical debate about this opening. I just more like to show ideas. What are the possibilities for both colors here? Because with theory in one lecture online, I can basically include all the ideas that are there. Basically, grandmasters sit with computers, engines, teams of people who worked on this opening, and it's impossible to just one lecture include everything. So I will try to avoid looking into specific lines, just show many lines, many ideas, and this is my goal. That's the goal of this lecture. A4 is the, let's say, more popular move, and here, for instance, very popular line is short castle, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, and after bishop a7, I played this position once against Etienne Bacro in 2018 in Pro Chess League, and I wasn't familiar with this line, and basically I got myself very quickly in trouble. And to be honest, I'm sort of ashamed to even show this game because I got the very bad position. But anyway, just to show ideas what exists here for black and for white. White tries to generally play through d4, get to play d4, and black tries kingside attack. And the kingside attack is very instructive how black can employ, because after knight d2, it seems like natural move to play d4 next. Black can play, for instance, is sort of modern theory, play knight and move knight h7, and the idea is to play h5, g4, maybe king g7 and f5 as well. So by combining those ideas, and again, there has been lots of theory and it's big topic of discussion nowadays, and I don't want to basically go into details, but in my opinion, black's chances are pretty good. Hikaru Nakamura played it recently as well with really good results. So bishop, this is one line. There are also more slow lines, let's say rook e1, let's say h6, but I will get to more into detail to a4 line a little bit later. In this game I want to focus on bishop b3. In here bishop b3, this is the different line. It's the old line because a4 is modern trend. a4, I decide to play short castle. However, there are more aggressive approaches as well, so let's have a look at them. Bishop a7. This is what actually in game number 9, in round number 9, Parham Magsoglu played against me in the same tournament, and I won the game, true, but after the opening I didn't really get much. But then he made one mistake. I will show what was his mistake in a second, and after this I got really good position, and I managed to win eventually. Nice game. Bishop a7, rook e1 I played, h6, and this is the more aggressive approach. Basically black tries to avoid castling short side and basically prepare keep the king on e8 and maybe go long side sometimes, and in general prepare g5 or maybe knight h5 and queen f6, then knight f4, or knight h7, queen f6, knight g5, ideas like this. For instance, knight d2, my opponent played knight h5. It's also possible to transpose to regular lines with short castle, which lead to typical maneuvering play. But let's look at more aggressive approaches. For instance, knight h7. Knight h5 will play my opponent, but let's look at knight h7. Knight f1, queen f6. And right now the idea is knight g5, bishop g4. Seems very reasonable, right? Knight e3, bishop takes e3. Also it's possible to play knight e7. However, bishop takes e3 is very direct. Gives the pair of bishops, true, but the idea is that after rook takes e3, knight e7, let's say d4, knight g6, all the knights are perfectly placed. Bishop g4, knight g5 comes, short castle. I don't really see big problems for black here. Seems like very playable position. White has pair of bishops, but on the other hand black has good chances to attack on the king side. Let's say knight g5, knight f4, those knights. For instance, let's make some random moves. I don't know, maybe h3 because stopping bishop g4, rook knight g5. For instance, takes. Suddenly knight f4 comes. There's open h file. For this rook, g4 may be coming as a threat. Suddenly white might find itself in trouble. Therefore, I think maybe d takes e5 is possible to try to open the center and try to create some counterplay in the center / on the queen side. After d takes e5, for instance, maybe queen d5 and queen c5 is an idea. In general, pretty much unbalanced play goes on, and both sides have its own chances. This is one possibility. Another possibility is much more aggressive, g5. Seems like that's why black played h6, just to follow up with g5 and just go for the kingside attack. Knight f1, g4, knight d2. And this is what I analyzed a little bit, and I like the actually position for both colors, because black plays very straightforward, knight h5, knight f4, queen f6. Inclusion of g5, g4 seems like only helps black because it just creates an attack, but if you play with white you may think like this g5, g4 maneuver, like pawn march basically weakened f5 square. So knight c4, knight f6, queen f6, bishop e3. If we trade bishops, knight will come to e3, the other knight will come to g3, then square f5 may be sort of like object of white's attack, of like white's play, and basically stopping black's attack. Maybe after trading those bishops, for instance, takes, knight takes, for instance, maybe knight f4, knight g4 could be possible, but I don't really want to open the g file. So for instance, knight g3, I'm not sure, maybe I can take on g4. And after h5, knight f5, maybe ideas could be as well rook f1 and f3. Try to open the f file and try to make use of this g5, g4 expansion, that it simply is a kind of a weakening rather than supporting black's attack. So there are some ideas like this. Honestly, I'm in general in favor of rather positional approach. That's why I would rather go for something like castle. This is what I did. So let's look at the most classical approach, castle. Seems like what can be more natural than this, and I really like this approach. This is what has happened in my game. Rook e1, very natural. It's also possible to play h3, and very often it transposes. And if you are playing this with black, I really like the idea that I used in this game. because after, let's say, rook e1, h6, knight bd2, I played bishop e6. And in this position, white always has to decide whether to take on e6 or not to take on e6. And it's basically a question of preference, in my opinion. But because after bishop takes e6, pawn takes e6, suddenly this rook on f8 opens, and I think usually black should have good, let's say, relatively good play on the king side connected with knight h5, knight f4. However, in this line it could be particularly good simply because white wasted tempi on move here earlier, bishop c4, bishop b3. That's why the theory sort of shifted towards a4, that we don't spend time on bishop b3. In case of bishop e6, we just immediately take on e6. And having a4 supports basically queenside expansion and makes black's activity less effective relative to what could happen in this position with bishop on b3. Let me just find this. Yeah, bishop with bishop on b3. So bishop b6. That's why I don't think bishop takes e6, f takes e6 is really dangerous for black. I like black's chances. Knight h5, knight f4 comes in. In case of b4, we can just come back, drop the bishop back, knight f1, knight h5, a4, and queen f6, for instance. And the knight f4 comes, the other knight comes, knight e7, knight g6. In normal position in the line from with a4, basically in this position, in this position, white would be to play. But here we at least managed to throw in another piece to the attack on the king side. So another thing which is important to know, that in case of rook e8, here knight f1, bishop e6 is not as good anymore, because rook e8 usually has the idea of basically recapturing the rook on e6. But after bishop e6, bishop takes e6, rook takes e6 is not possible anymore because d4. And white was on time to play knight f1, knight from b1, d2, f1, and play d4. Right now, after takes, basically bishop before d5, white simply has big advantage because after takes, rook takes e4, d takes e6. Two pieces, in my opinion, are stronger than the rook. For instance, white can play b3, bishop b2, knight f3, knight g3, or knight d3, for instance, and white is clearly better. That's why it's important to know that rook takes d6 not always works. This is a very typical idea, but it only works if here not rook e1 happens, but h3, h6, knight d2, bishop e6, not bishop c2. I meant let's say here after knight d2, rook e8, for instance, rook e1, bishop e6, and here it works. Simply because after bishop e6 we can simply take rook takes e6, and d4 is not possible because knight stands in the way of the queen that supports d4 push. That's why we have time here to play rook e8, bishop takes e6, bishop e6, and rook takes e6. But as happened in my game, it was not possible. Simply because it could have been possible if I played rook e8, knight f1, bishop e6. It wouldn't be possible if I played rook e8 because simply he's on time to play knight f1. In case he plays starts with h3, it's not possible. Bishop e6 I played. That's why I didn't play rook e8 but bishop e6 immediately, because I'm not really worried about bishop takes e6, f takes e6 structures. In my case, my rook is on f8. Because if I have to play, let's say this bishop e6 and take with the pawn on e6, I certainly don't like my rook on e8. Rook seems pretty silly, this rook there, and I would rather have my rook on f8, because at some point probably I would have to anyway play rook f8. I'm just wasting 10 pieces here. So having said that, I played bishop e6. My opponent played knight f1, and it's important to notice that because white hasn't played yet h3, white cannot play here bishop c2, simply because black has very aggressive idea here knight g4, which is also important to know if you play Italian, that if white don't play h3, this idea of knight g4 is very often possible, and here it works perfectly. In here, for instance, after bishop, if this was the same position, but rook was on f1 instead and pawn on h3, then bishop c2 would be possible. But in here is not possible. So just to have quick look what would happen if the pawn is on h3. In this position, we can just play d5. And this is typical idea. We want to play d5 with bishop on c5 in order to have possibility of retreating with this bishop in the future to f8. And this is the idea that I use in this game. A little bit move order, but anyway, it happened. Bishop e6, knight f1, knight bishop takes b3. I think it's good to trade those bishops. In case of knight bishop c2, as I said earlier, knight g4 works, so let's just show example line. Rook f1 takes, knight e3, queen e2, knight takes c2, rook b1, bishop takes a2, and black simply wins. It's very instructive, in my opinion. My opponent played knight f1, and here I decided to take on b3, queen takes b3, queen d7. Usually it's good to trade those bishops, simply because bishop on b3 is very annoying piece if you think about it, because it sort of puts some pressure on white's king. It's not easy to sometimes there could be ideas of sacrificing on h6 and basically some queen g6 check and something, and we can take because we will be pinned. For instance, in here, if we can imagine this bishop comes to h6, pawn takes on h6, and then queen comes to g6, basically would be some very strong attack. Or of course, very imaginative future, but as an idea of this bishop on b3, this Italian bishop on b3, because bishop c4, if I can name it like that, is very, very annoying. That's why black wants to usually trade those bishops. And here, this is what I'm doing. Bishop takes b3, queen takes b3, queen d7. And I believe positions are around equal, but it's very strategic and requires lots of understanding. And after knight g3, rook f e8, h3, I could have played, for instance, bishop a7. But the point is that I don't really need to play this move, because I want to ideally, the perfect setup here for black is to play d5 and retreat with this bishop to f8. Because this knight on this knight maneuver from b1, d2, f1, g3 allows sometimes, I mean very often actually, this knight come to f5, where basically dominates those pawns, and we can never play g6 because pawn on h6 will be lost. Therefore, with bishop on f8, for instance, let's say queen c2, bishop f8, knight, I don't know, knight f5, let's say, king h7, maybe bishop d2, and we can play just g6. This is the entire idea of bringing the bishop to f8 and basically kicking the knight from f5, which is usually a very annoying piece to face here. So that's the point. That's why I play here d5. And usually, if you can play d5 at some point, you should do it with black here in the Italian. So for instance, bishop d2 could have been played as well. And here black can equalize, can have very good game, but can easily equalize after in many ways, but the most simple one is possibly to take, and queen e6. Offering to trade queens is usually a good idea if you know, in such positions, because you are not getting mated. The knight on g3 comes to f5, but will not create any serious threats. And if white doesn't want to trade queens, let's say queen c2, this knight on g3, I mean, this queen on c2 doesn't really do much, so we can just play rook a d8, and I don't see really problems for black. The same knight f5 can be met very often by knight d7. We can just trade those knights, and I don't see any danger here for black. Therefore, here my opponent decided to take and basically change a little bit the nature of the position, because right now pawn on d3 becomes sort of a target for me, but on the other hand, my pawn on e5 is could be kind of like also a weakness sometimes. Basically, I may be forced to play f6 at some point and weaken all the light squares around my king, which is not the ideal thing for me, in my opinion. So knight takes d5, knight e4, and again, if I can, I move this bishop back to f8. This is what I'm doing. And in here, it's very important to note that such ideas as bishop takes h6 don't work. Yes, bishop after if takes, queen takes d5 is very nice, of course. Knight f6, king g7, knight takes d5, white just wins a pawn. True, but after bishop takes h6, there we don't have to take. It's not checkers. We don't have to take on h6. We can play at first knight a5, for instance, and we are kicking this queen out from b3, where it doesn't attack this knight on d5 anymore. Let's say queen c2, and then we can easily take, and white simply is left with piece down here, because after c4 we can play, for instance, f5 or knight b4, hitting the queen on c2. White is black is just simply winning here, being a piece up. So in case bishop h6 doesn't work, then my opponent played bishop d2. I played b5. Again, knight bishop takes h6 never works because this is the 95 idea. Same thing. And in case of and right now I think position is still equal, but slowly gets a little bit in black's favor, simply because I have a little bit more space. And usually whenever white decides to take on d5, it's a very committal decision, simply because in the long run black will have this pawn on e5 versus this d3 pawn, and usually if you are having such structure, the side with the pawn on e5, or if let's say if we do the mirror image, pawn on e4 and pawn on d6, with playing with white, for instance, it usually is in the favor of the side that has more advanced pawn. And here I have this more advanced pawn, so I have a little bit more space. Pawn d3 is rather would be a sort of object of my attack, and pawn e5 rather is a strength rather than a weakness in here, in my opinion. So after bishop f8, bishop d2, my opponent played, I played b5, and here Amin Bassem played move a4 pretty quickly, if I remember correctly, but it's already a mistake. Here basically was it was time basically to admit that position is just equal and play rook a d1, play solid, bring the last piece to the center, and make sure on d3 this weak pawn is secured. Maybe at some point prepare d4, don't avoid simplifications, and if necessary agree to a draw. This was correct play. I would play, for instance, queen e6. I don't think I'm any better here. My position is any better. Rook a d8, possibly I would go next. Maybe knight a5, c5. I would try maybe to win somehow. But with correct play, definitely white has no real weaknesses. d3 is only potential weakness that I can really get into right now. And if white decides to play d4, it will be basically immediate central fight, where white shouldn't be any worse. Therefore, after this was the correct play, but my opponent played a4, and here this is actually helping black, and this is a very important idea to know, because after b4, suddenly black is just better. I continue gaining space, and usually I agree that this a4 b4 sort of fights for the c4 square for pieces, let's say queen or knight. But in here, more important is a different thing, that this knight from f3 or e4 cannot really get to c4. It's not easy, because this bishop on d2 stands in the way, and this knight is already developed to e4. It's not easy. And there are bigger issues, for instance, pawn on d3 that's potentially weak, and opening b file is rather in black's favor, simply because this queen will be under some pressure on the b file. So, having said that, my opponent played here a5. Objectively, I think already black is slightly better here. I played rook a b8, very logical. a5 could be again not the best move, simply because after a5 and rook a b8, I have this b5 square for my rook very often, and this is actually what happened in the game, because after a5, rook a b8, queen c4, I played rook b5, and suddenly pawn on a5 is a weakness, and I'm hitting on this pawn. It's very hard to defend it, and I think already black is just clearly better, not even slightly better, but maybe between slightly better and much better, I would say. Definitely I'm having the initiative, I'm in charge. In case of Queen A4, I could play, for instance, either Rook B5 or maybe Rook E8. And if Queen C2, I can consider playing B3, Queen B1 and F5. Basically it's trying to kick all white pieces back, and after Knight G3 just Bishop D6. And it's clear that pawn on A5 remains a weakness. My pieces are better placed. Therefore D4 is never an option because I just simply go E4. C4 weakens all the squares. I can simply prepare a further expansion of my pawns, and black is simply better here. Okay, because right now is already black who is better, let's actually switch. Let's actually flip the board and look at this position from black's perspective, because I think I employed very nice strategy in this game. Here my opponent, okay, first of all he plays Queen C4, but if C4, Knight F4 takes is clearly better for black, because D4 is not possible because the pawn will just fall. It's also important to note that this, whenever we can, we should play actively and bring this in here. We should play Knight F4 simply because it just throws in another piece to the white's camp and creates some problems, and we are not afraid of this because D4 is never an option, as I said. So here my opponent played Queen C4. Possibly instead of A5 he should have played Knight G3, but after Rook A8, Rook A1, A5, Queen C2, he's sort of forced to long-term defense. For instance, Knight F6, on D3 is hanging. Possibly Bishop E3, he still holds somehow relative balance, but definitely if I have to choose, I'll definitely choose black here. But probably it was much better because after A5 was what he did, his pawn E5 is simply a weakness. It's a very committal move, and if you play white, you have to always make sure that A5 is not is actually good, that it doesn't this pawn become a weakness. Rook A8, Queen C4, Rook B5, very strong move. But on this move I fought for quite a bit, simply because I realized that he basically needs to come up with some direct idea to solve his opening problems. I mean, namely with this pawn on D3. And I wasn't sure if Rook B5 actually allows him to break free with move like D4. And this is what I was mostly calculating, but eventually I came to a realization that D4 doesn't really work. Therefore, after D4, I played F5. I would have played F5, this is what I calculated, Knight G3, E4. And right now Knight D5 is impossible because takes, rook, and takes, and rook takes D5. I'm simply pawn up. There is no any compensation for this pawn. And after Knight H4, Knight takes A5, Queen E2, Knight B6 is a very important move. Where basically I'm taking the C4 square under control, and with my rook, because my knights cover C4 square, and rook on the 5th rank covers F5 pawn, and I basically am just winning here because I'm pawn up, and all white pieces are misplaced, and my pieces are placed actually perfectly, and yeah, that's basically game over here. He played Knight G3, B takes C3, B takes C3, Knight takes E, and now Knight takes A5 would have been a big mistake, because suddenly after Queen A2 all my pieces are sort of loose on the 5th rank. Knight on D5 and Rook B5 fall under C4, and as Rook on B5 defends Knight on A5, Knight on A5 is as well loose because after C4 a bishop from D2 would hit on this Knight on A5. Therefore, I wouldn't have anything better than just simply coming back, hoping that after C4 I have Knight B4, but after Queen takes A6, position is just roughly equal. Simply, you know, I'm not even pawn up here, and we basically traded A5 pawn for A6, which where pawn on A5 is simply a weakness, and pawn on A6 gives me very important B5 square for my rook. Same thing would have happened after this. Queen takes A6, position just equal. Therefore, here I was very happy to find knight f6, simply because having played knight f6, I threatened to take on a5 right now with knight, and my knight on d5 and rook on b5 after queen a2 will not be hanging. And also I open my queen to look at this pawn on d3. Suddenly, black has two weaknesses. White has two weaknesses that they have to look after, and suddenly it's not easy. It's not easy. I think already black is much better, and all started with this move a5, which was a mistake in my opinion. And here, my opponent finally made tactical blunder, and after which I gained like decisive advantage. Probably it was the best just to come back, admit that there is nothing better than this, but after takes rook d8, for instance, black is clearly better. Rook on, I'm hitting on his pawn on d3, and still threatening to take on a5. There, it's simply just overwhelming in my opinion. Also, another move possible is f5 and king h7, which leads to similar positions, because whenever d4 happens, I can play e4, pawn on a5 is again weakness. There are lots of ideas for black, or everywhere basically I'm much better. Therefore, he played rook eb1, but anyway, this was the best play. He played rook e1, rook b1, basically hoping that in tactical complications, he may have to kind of swindle out. But basically, I calculated nicely that after knight takes a5, queen a2, I can just take the other pawn. And I basically collected two weaknesses, and actually after my knight on a5 isn't really hanging after rook takes b5, a takes b5, because after queen takes a5, e4, both pieces cannot defend themselves. And I will be just at least a pawn up. But such an important pawn, and also black-white's position is collapsing because pawn on c3 will be weak, and most importantly, king on g1 will be also in danger. So let's see what happened. Knight d4, queen takes d2, knight f1, and now I played very strong move queen d3. Simply after queen takes b5, I want to have an idea of queen takes c3. If knight takes b5, rook e5. That's the point. Therefore, I force him to take on c7 if he wants to be only pawn down, not the two pawns down. But this is met by b4, which undermines this knight on d4, which suddenly is very unstable. Because if I take on c3, seems like it's I'll still be two pawns up, and game will be just game over. Therefore, my opponent played rook c1, trying to hold on to the c3 pawn and knight on d4. But this falls into another tactical idea, which is again very nice. And I played e3, f takes e3, rook takes e3, knight c6, and yeah, the idea here that after takes I can take, and let's say king h2, queen takes c1, just wins the entire piece and is winning the game. The rook on c1 is under attack right now, and he played knight c6, trying to maybe complicate things, and but anyway, position is just lost for white, because after b3, queen b8, trying to pin me on the back rank, and the kid on this b2, the b3 pawn, I just played b2, and here I calculated that after queen takes b2, rook e2, I'm simply winning because of the attack that I have on his king as well, and his very poor position of his pieces. For instance, queen b7, queen e4. Here he resigned, by the way, because after queen b7, queen e4, for instance, I can just either take on g2, or basically after knight d7 I can just be a piece up. So here he resigned. I was very happy with this game, and I think in this game there were lots of ideas, were basically lots of strategic ideas that are important to know. For instance, this pawn a5 is a very responsible and very committal move that sometimes may backfire at you. You have to be careful with playing such moves. Also, it's good to play sometimes move like b4 if you are gaining space and you don't have to worry about weakening this c4 square. Another thing which was, I think, very important is the idea of playing d5 and actually retreating the bishop to f8 to prevent all the kind of counterplay on the king side. And finally, the trading here of the bishops, from going like backwards a little bit, but like trading with the bishops is usually in black's favor because it simplifies the position. White is usually, I mean, as white begins the game, white usually is in charge, so trading some pieces usually helps reduce the tension and helps with the defense. So bishop e6 is a good idea, defensive idea, not fearing here these structures, because with the rook on f8 and having idea in mind of knight h5, knight f4, or maybe knight e7, knight g6, maybe queen f6, queen g6, or queen e8, queen g6, maybe doubling the rook on the f file, black has pretty good play. On the other hand, it's important also to note that white can play here a4 move, which is, in my opinion, a little bit better, and that's why the theory shifted towards this move. And why? Let's quickly have a. I'm not sure whether there is enough time for the second game, but I will just quickly show what happened in my game versus Rinat Jumabayev. It was the same tournament, and I played a4 in the same position. a4, short castle, rook e1, and after h6, h3, rook e8. Here again, he decided to play rook e8, but here he has clear idea in mind to play bishop e6. As I said earlier, he can do it yet, but the thing is that it's very hard for me to come better move than knight bd2. It's by far the most logical move, and I think the majority of the players go for it. Knight bd2, bishop e6, and after takes he can just take with the rook. Another idea is possible, of course, as I said earlier, to play bishop e6 immediately, and I think Vladimir Kramnik played it very, very frequently. If I'm not mistaken, he played against Daniele Vocaturo in Qatar 2014 or 2015. If I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure, but I think I'm right if I'm not mistaken. And basically, it was a very unbalanced game after takes. But here, because white hasn't committed yet to developing this knight to d2, it's possible to play bishop e3, or maybe play b4 and bishop a7, bishop e3, and then try to trade those bishops, and then play knight bd2, and just in one move, don't waste time for knight f1 and then knight takes e3. Just keep this knight on d2, and then prepare maybe d4 at some point, and this is what white should generally do in such positions. Maybe also expand with b5 at some point. This is what white should do. And in case of knight h5, knight f4, it's okay to play g3, for instance. It's, as an idea, it's important to know that with white, this is the sort of approach to this position. Of course, it leads to very unbalanced play, which requires analysis. For instance, let's make some random moves. Rook e3, let's say knight d7, knight bd2, let's say queen e8. For instance, maybe not queen e8, because queen e8 already allows d4. It's already after takes, white's slightly better because of the center. However, in here, let's say knight g6, d4, takes. Here's the center, true, but we can play maybe knight h5, knight f4, and we can play, for instance, g3 here, and I don't see anything wrong with this. Position is pretty much unbalanced still. However, I prefer white in this case. Another possible idea is to basically not take on d4 and play some moves like knight d7, and basically then try to play knight f4, queen f6, something like this. But then, for instance, g3 could be possible, and positions are in general very, very playable. Long games, and basically it's under debate, theoretical debate, who is better here. Probably positions are around equal. Therefore, having said that, my opponent decided on something else. Rook e8, knight d2, bishop e6. Here we can take with the rook, coming relative to the position without on knight d2 and f1 or b1. But here takes before bishop a7, queen c2 is the sort of the main line in here, and my opponent played queen d7. Again, please note that I played before trying to kick his bishop to a7. In case I played, for instance, knight f1, maybe d5 would have followed, and after b4 he might have come back to f8, which is usually the desirable place for the square for the bishop. Therefore b4 is typical. Bishop a7, forcing this bishop to go back. Queen c2, queen d7, knight f1, and d5. And here, basically, another possibility is knight d7. There are lots of ideas. For instance, very interesting idea is also knight d7, knight f1, knight g6, knight g3. And this also leads to unbalanced play. I think white should be slightly better, but however, I played myself one time this position with white, and I lost. So you know, anything can happen. After queen d7, knight f1, f1, my opponent played d5, trying to break free in the center immediately. Knight g3 is I played knight g3. It actually already is not the best move, because after I was supposed to play bishop e3, takes, and try to trade those bishops, because as I said earlier, white black wants to trade those bishops on c4, light square bishops, like here, for instance. And usually, I mean, maybe not usually, but sometimes this bishop on c5 can become also a problem for white. Therefore, it's important to note, like I could have done in the game, I didn't, but I could have done, and I should have done probably, or here, bishop e3, this bishop on a7 basically puts lots of pressure on f2. That's why we should just trade this bishop with bishop e3. Same thing here. Sorry, I'm switching the lines and so on. Just want to show ideas that I have in mind. But after queen d7 here, d5, the correct move is again bishop e3. It's the same idea that black did earlier with bishop e6, takes, rook takes e6. Bishop on a7 is annoying, and bishop on c1 doesn't have any real future, only disturbs white's pieces. That's why it should be traded. And again, theory goes on. Bishop takes e3, knight takes e3, let's say rook d8, b5 is my analysis, knight d7 and c4, there are some ideas like this, and after d4, knight d5. For instance, knight g6, position is pretty much unclear, both sides have its own chances. For instance, black can maybe take it on some point on d5, and play rook f6, knight f4, or maybe rook takes f3, maybe black can also play c6, and provoke knight takes f6, rook takes f6. On the other hand, white can play some random moves like g3, try to cover f4, then king g2, make sure that knight f4 never happens. Also, king h2 is possible, preparing on all of this. Therefore, position is full of strategical ideas and needs further, basically, you know, exploration. Having said that, I played knight g3, which is not the best move, but I decided not to play it. I thought I just want to keep more pieces on the board. Rook d8, bishop b2, and my idea is to play here c4 at some point. And with bishop on b2, it seems like I'm stupidly putting this bishop in front of the pawn on c3, but idea is to play c4 and then I cover d4 square. So I didn't want to trade those bishops. I wanted to play against this bishop on b2, on a7, and actually kind of worked for me in this game, because after b5, it's not only move positions roughly equal. It's possible to also take a queen d3. And this position is also playable. Possibly after takes, take king f1, white can hope for something. However, positions around equal still. And after b5, queen b3, d takes d4, d takes e4, rook d6, a takes b5, a takes b5, knight f5, rook d3. Maybe I skipped through the last few moves, but maybe I should have said that here is important idea, basically, that take rook d6 and rook d3. Because everything is in the center for black, and black can take control over the d-file. It's possible, however, it runs into other things which happen in the game, because takes, knight f5, rook d3, and right now I have beautiful tactical idea, rook takes a7. And if knight takes a7, knight takes e5. And that's basically what I'm talking about. I play against this bishop on a7, so you can also try to play against this bishop on a7. It not always works. In this game it worked, but you don't have to trade always these bishops. It depends on personal preferences and what you think is the best. But in general, you should remember that such ideas exist. And here, after rook takes f3, I took, knight takes a7, and c4. Suddenly my bishop opens up, pawn is on e5 attacked, and I think I have decent pressure here. My opponent went wrong here, and after knight c6, he could have equalized, but he played queen d2, and I had some chances to win this game, and unfortunately I did not win this game. It was a draw. Let me quickly show how it happened. Queen c3, b takes c4, queen takes d2, rook takes d2, bishop takes e5. And after, in here I thought I have very good chances to win this game because I'm hitting on pawn on c7. Knight on f5 is very powerful because it puts some pressure on g7, h6 and f6. And this bishop hits here and here. I thought I have very good chances. Also rook c1 could be coming to attack this guy. But tactically it all perfectly works for black. There are basically two ways that black can basically hold this. There is knight h5, which is very instructive. Ignoring pawn on c7, ignoring everything, simply getting out of this knight bishop takes f6 idea, and after, let's say, knight e7, king f8, rook a1, simply entering set endgame, and position is basically roughly equal. Let's say rook d7, analyze rook a5, rook d1, king g2, rook b1. Basically, black has enough counterplay here to make a draw. For instance, takes, knight g5, and all the rook endgames will be drawn. And if knight f4 comes, I will be forced to enter the rook endgame. Therefore, after b5, for instance, it is just the draw. Even though I pawn up, there is no way I can win this with white. Another move is what he played in the game, knight c6. And here also, I thought I had pretty good chance during the game, but I didn't. I thought knight h6 was the best try, and yes, it was a best try, but anyway, black holds after, for instance, takes, and knight d4. And I don't want to dive too deep into analysis, but black holds, for instance, bishop takes d4, rook takes d4, king f1, and again, rook endgames are very likely to be drawn, and after f5 my pawn structure is very likely getting messed up because I can't bring my king here. If I could bring my king to e2 and basically play rook c1 and king e3, then yes, I would be winning, but after f5 I can't really do it. Because after king e2 there is possible to take on e4, also it's possible to maybe play f4. f4 I don't really like so much, but taking on e4 seems sufficient. King e3, rook d3, for instance. Just to quickly show, takes, king e3, rook d3 seems like it should be just a draw. And after taking on f5, c3, rook c1, rook c4, this looks again like a draw. I don't believe that white had any chances to win this. So let's finally see what happened in the game, because knight h6 was anyway the best try because he would have to find basically knight d4, but I decided to play bishop takes f6, hoping that here after rook c1 he wouldn't find knight d4, because if he doesn't play knight d4, I think I might have very good chances. For instance, after knight d5 I can play f4 maybe, and otherwise knight takes before rook takes c4, knight on f5 remains very strong, and I can take it on c7, basically create some mating nets, mating attack. Could be very unpleasant, but knight d4 is very strong, and this transfers into drawish rook endgame after rook takes c4, knight takes, pawn takes, and this we played for another 25 moves, after which if we eventually agree to a draw. It doesn't really matter rest of the game, so here I'm gonna stop. Anyway, I think it was I mean, in this lecture I tried to show, just to sum up, I tried to show different ideas for both colors in Italian game. This opening leads to very balanced strategic fight where both sides have its own chances, and I encourage everyone to learning it on his or her own the details about this opening, checking games of Grandmasters, and I hope I at least interested someone to go for this opening. So thank you guys for this lecture, and see you next time.